I'm Dr. Nicholas Mukisa, and I'm just having a casual discussion with the High Commissioner for British to Uganda, Her Excellency Kate. We're discussing in her perspective, what does she see as the future of energy in Uganda, and the emphasis is on the energy transition. We are cognizant of the different support the UK has committed to supporting the transition in Uganda, and we are going to have a casual discussion where she responds to my casual questions in a casual way. We don't expect too much diplomacy. It's about what she feels and thinks about the energy transition. I'm glad to have you, Your Excellency, Kate.
It's very nice to be here, Nicholas. Thank you.
As I mentioned, Uganda and of course the globe at large, we are looking at the energy transition. But Uganda is largely a country with a population 75 to 80% living in rural areas. And these are areas that are struggling to access electricity. Do you have any thoughts of how we can support these people beyond maybe through the UK government or in partnerships, that to ensure that these people that live where there's no grid also have access to electricity?
Absolutely, Nicholas. And I think one of the things that's really exciting about the energy transition is perhaps some of our traditional views that a big infrastructure heavy grid needed to reach everywhere in the country. Perhaps those are sounding a little outdated now because of technology advances, because of innovation. And actually what we're finding is that mini-grid solutions are actually really working and are very, very cost efficient and are able to almost leapfrog perhaps some of those traditional thought processes around electrification. So we have two British investors that we have supported and continue to support here in Uganda. Winch Energy UK, which actually won an award here in Uganda, I think, last year from memory. And it's supporting 24,000 homesteads across rural Uganda, providing them with reliable sources of electricity off of mini-grid. We also have Mandulis Energy, and we know there are other investors ready to come. And I think it's really that, breaking out of perhaps some of the traditional ways of thinking, looking at those new opportunities and really harnessing the power of the private sector to deliver electricity for people. I think there's some real opportunities right now here in Uganda.
Wow. And, I also, I've been raised up in a rural area, and looking at the enthusiasm and the commitment you have towards rural areas gives me peace of mind and happiness that when I go back to my village and tell them, look, maybe part of this electricity we're enjoying here is the support of the UK. And that brings me to my other question. As still looking at the transition, Uganda is also envisioning an industrialized economy. But over the years, we've struggled with grid stability. And unless we address this, industrialization remains a challenge. Could you really have any other options, or do you have any thoughts on how best we can address the grid stability, or probably you have any support already committed to that maybe I may not be in the know?
So I think, understandably, Uganda's kind of focus was initially on generation. And actually what we're finding now is Uganda, with 80% of its electricity needs met by hydro, it's a real world leader on delivering that generation from green sources. But as you're right, Nicholas, the challenge really now is about that transmission out through into the main grid networks and to actually main sources of demand, be those for industry, for the industrialization process, or actually big urban demand centres. So the UK government has for many years been investing in supporting transmission, progress in transmission, stabilising that grid, as you call it, making sure we can release electricity from its generation centres into high demand centres. A lot of that's been done through a very big project called Get Fit, which we are a major partner in together with the EU, Germany and others. And Norway. And I think that's done an awful lot of good around the whole of the country, out east, including in Moroto, but also further afield as well. But we don't want to stop there. We know transmission is a real now challenge for Uganda to be able to ensure that not just that stability issue, but we're dealing with those costs of deemed energy, that held energy within the generation system. And that deemed energy thing and the investment in transmission is really a critical part. So we have a number of investments through our British vehicle for supporting investments in developing countries, BII International, which will be looking at investing in the transmission sector here in Uganda.
Wow. You talked about transmission and you mentioned Get Fit. when I was doing my first and second and third degrees, I was so, I've always been interested in the feed-in tariff schemes, and I know that the Get Fit came in, to make these projects really viable and profitable for the developers here. And when you talked about it, I remember a lot of the power plants that have come up. Most of them are actually in rural areas, but of course integrated on the grid. Last year, the government amended its Electricity Law Act, the Electricity Act. And this amendment comes in to support the unbundling of the transmission. And this is somewhere you've really mentioned in your response, that you're more interested in the transmission. Are you really interested that you're bringing in even other investors? Because this is still a hot cake. In my knowledge, I've not known any other private sector that have tried to venture into that. Could you be packaging some companies from the UK to come and invest in the transmission system for Uganda?
I think we're really supportive of Uganda's aim to have the lowest cents per kilowatt hour its system can possibly do, because we know how key electricity is to unlocking economic development for growth and for jobs. So actually, working with government, but also actually, importantly, the private sector, to deliver, real vehicles that can generate that investment, to look at really diverse ranges and different innovative means of financing that investment. Electricity is expensive, whatever we do. Those initial setup costs are considerable. So actually understanding where government is coming from, understanding what consumers need, is really part of when we look at our support to Uganda. It's bringing both of those together to say what is needed now. And what's needed now is transmission. So we will be there.
Oh, that's great. Beyond that, now that you're transmitting this electricity, I think a month or two ago, the president passed a ban on charcoal. And in Uganda, I think close to 90% of our households lay on traditional biomass. And we've lost tremendous amounts of forest cover. If you look at the percentage in the 1990, where we had over close to 24% of forest cover. In 2020, we had less than 10% of forest cover available. And this sends a long signal, because we are destined for climate change. The seasons have changed. How can we really support our people? And I think electricity, transition on electricity side is a bit easier, but the cooking remains a challenge. Are there any interests on the UK side to quick start this cooking transition so that people can venture into cleaner options, be it ethanol, be electricity where the grid is available, so that people can really try to use even the electricity. You're investing in the transmission, you're going to bring it to my village, and Your Excellency, people will not use it. So we need to see how are we going to package it. Could it be through productive use of energy? Could we bring new technologies that people look and see, electricity is essential, not just a luxury?
So I think there's two parts to your question. The first actually is around supporting Ugandans to understand the real value that they have within their environment. The President hasn't just spoken out about banning charcoal, he's also been really clear about the need to protect wetlands, the need to protect forest areas. And I think that is, as you've said in the figures, it is worrying, that deforestation across Uganda. And I think through our work within the Ministry of Finance and across the Ministry of Water and Energy, actually Environment and the Ministry of Energy, looking at different financing vehicles to support Ugandans to see the value in protecting their environment. That's the first part, I think, of the story and the work that we are doing and the work we do in Uganda. The second part of that story is changing how we do things. And that's difficult to do, right? Changing behaviours is hard. And when I'm very lucky in the job that I do, I get to live in many different countries and amongst many different cultures. And here in Uganda, I know how people are attached to the way that they cook matoke, for example, or their beans, and how they need to be done in a certain way. And that's why one of the projects that we support is with Loughborough University, who's working with many different stakeholders here in Uganda to ensure that we don't just get a pressure cooker that does things that may work elsewhere, but we do a pressure cooker that actually works on matoke, that works on beans, that people can taste that it is the same, if not better. than what they were able to get before, because you have to be able to incentivize that behavior change and to make sure you take people on that journey. So I think this is going to be one of those challenges, and we welcome continued support from Ugandans to be what we call is that sort of leading edge, you know, those early adopters of that new technology. Because in the long term, the benefits for, you know, not just actually, you know, this will be less costly as charcoal becomes rarer, as forests are fewer, so the price goes up. So you are actually going for a cheaper, longer term option by moving to green. And that really is the whole story about green growth for us. That actually, you know, moving to this transition that we talk about is really about finding not just sustainable solutions, but economically sustainable solutions for the long term. So you should try the matoke cooked, you should go see.
Actually, I'm one of those that use the electric pressure cooker. And I like the way you speak. I think next time I should visit you and cook for us. It feels like the cooking is one of your expertise.
I think I like the eating. I'm not so sure about the cooking.
Then I didn't know about that, but when you explained the cooking part, it felt like really you're in the kitchen making things happen. I want to give you one more question, and it comes now in line with the cooking. You mentioned that the promotion of this cooking, or you know, like the electric pressure cooker, you're trying to develop technologies that are domesticated to the social needs or the community needs. And I've got to mention, Uganda is a youthful country. We have, I think, over 70 to 80% of our population are youthful people, quite innovative, because you know we have scarcity of jobs. So people are innovating, are creating their own jobs. And unfortunately, though we are creative and innovative, we are, you know, handicapped when it comes to finances. And credit in this country is quite expensive. Actually, it's very hard for someone to just start a business and go for a loan at 20 to 22% interest rate. Could there be any arrangements that maybe the UK is looking at these young people? How can we support their innovations? How can we hold them, you know, to be a successful people? And tomorrow, we shall always remember the UK logo on the whatever we say, supported and held by the UK.
I'm very pleased to hear that. And I think you couldn't be more right. I mean, one of my real experiences here in Uganda is just the potential in the youth of Uganda. You know, wherever you go, you meet people who've got ideas, who've got views, who've got business ideas or ways that they think things can be done better or changed. It is that human capital that you have is actually Uganda's greatest strength and should be harnessed. So we have 2 programs actually that are looking at supporting young people, but actually across Uganda. I don't want to be ageist about this. You know, some of us older people have good ideas too.
Absolutely do.
So, but you know, actually looking at whether our UK Innovate program or our Climate Accelerator program, both of these are looking at, you know, people who've got those ideas, that first kernel of an idea, but actually don't have the skills to be able to work that up into a fully fledged business proposal that's able to attract a more diverse range of financing. And then that reduces the cost of the financing, because financiers, when they bring money to market, be those development financiers or private sector financiers, they want to know they're dealing with someone who is serious. And actually both of these programs look at building that capability with people's businesses, young people's businesses, and making sure that they have the expertise, whether that's the financial expertise, the business expertise, or in this case, actually the climate expertise, because it isn't always straightforward. And actually supporting them to build a really stellar business case. And we've seen this have huge success, has raised hundreds of millions of pounds elsewhere, and it is now Uganda's time. So we launched this at the end of last month. We'll continue to work on both of those programs. And this is why sponsoring this conference is so important to us, because we know that there are people here with ideas. And if they are here today, if they are here this week, we want to hear from them. How they're making those a reality and how they're going to build a better Uganda for tomorrow.
That's great. It feels like the UK and the partners have already envisaged the transition time for Uganda, because looking at the different things we've discussed, looking at how enthusiastic you are about them, I believe, I don't know, maybe it's my own belief, but I think Uganda is headed for the right path of its transition. Not only in electricity, because normally people look at electricity, but we've discussed the cooking, and the commitments on that side are really remarkable. But innovation is very key as well in the transition. We need to innovate things that are ours here. What do you think we need to do different now?
So I think what for me is absolutely clear is that Uganda's potential to be an absolute superpower in the green energy space is not in doubt. For us, for me personally, from everything that we've seen and we experience. I think, and the private sector is going to be the main vehicle for delivering that growth. It is in, the majority of countries globally, being able to actually release the power of the private sector is going to be fundamental. And if I were to give one word of advice to Uganda, I would actually say that government doesn't need to feel it needs to do it all. Its role as government is to provide that framework, that supportive framework that enables private sector to fly. And if government can do that, and if government can make sure that it is providing that support of understanding the needs of investors as well as the needs here in Uganda, then I think, the sky is the limit. So that would be my one message. We need to get that right.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sparing your time to share with us those insightful and, of course, the different projects that the UK has committed to support Uganda. On behalf of Uganda, we pledge our commitment in return to work with you and ensure that your support yields results. Thank you very much.